Hello, it's John Stacy coming to you with another Real Talk video. This time I'm in the Rawls High School auditorium because nobody's using it this period, and this is my off period basically. Um, Today I want to talk about a question I've had thoughts about for years, and the way people talk about this kind of it doesn't bug me, but it's like I feel like there's some nuance that's kind of skipped over a little bit, and that is the question of is music school worth it or was music school worth it? And yeah, so I went to a state school. I went to West Texas A&M University for my bachelor's and my master's. I got a bachelor's in music composition, and also the actual name is all level certification with an instrumental emphasis, which is a music education degree, but yeah, it's a certification program. So that's basically training me to be able to teach music of any kind from early childhood to grade 12. And then my master's was also in composition, but I focused on third stream, which is a combination of classical and jazz. And also, I basically took the time to teach myself audio production, and all of my research during my master's was on producing um, remote recordings, essentially. And this was before COVID, so it became useful not long after I graduated. And then I'm currently finishing up a doctorate in French horn performance from Texas Tech, which is another state school. It's a large state school, but so I didn't go to a conservatory. I didn't go to a private school. I didn't go to, the Berkeley or the Manhattan School of Music. I didn't go to any of those. And a lot of times when people are giving thoughts on is music school worth it, they usually are talking from the perspective of somebody who went to one of those, which is fine, you know, but there's something that gets a little bit missed over because, like, the point of music school varies depending on where you go and what you're studying and what your goals are. So, like, in my case, I didn't really go into it wanting to be a composer. I really took a liking to the composition professor who was Dr. B.J. Brooks, and wanted to do composition because I could compose and I enjoyed it. But I kind of was like, I need to be around this guy as much as possible because he's a genius and I need to learn from him. And composition was the easiest, most direct way to do that. And then the education thing, it wasn't a backup because I don't really consider backup plans, but it was I don't want that door to be closed. And put a bookmark in that idea because I'll come back to it later. But so, I did those. And over the course of my degree, I was treated like a performance major by the horn professor because he held all of his students to the same standard. He wasn't expecting everybody to be the top performer and put in the level of work, but he wasn't going to say, you're an education major, so your standards are lower. He was like, okay, you're a great player who practices a lot. I'm going to expect a lot from you. And I realized that's like the best thing that I could have had as a player. But I also played in the jazz band, so I got a lot of development on trumpet and bass trombone and a little bit of tenor trombone. Um, and I did a lot of things there. But my goal wasn't to really, I'm going to go be a composer and try to make it as a composer, or I'm going to be the best band director. My thing was I'm going to develop as a musician. I'm going to learn when it comes to composition, I'm going to learn how to orchestrate and write counterpoint and be able to analyze a style and write. And whenever it came to music education, the standards there were really high. West Texas A&M is known as a band director school, basically, and a lot of really successful band directors have come from there. So I was like, okay, I'm going to learn about music education and I'm going to learn about child psychology and a lot of the stuff that I'm required to do, but I'm going to actually take an interest in it. And then whenever I graduated, I couldn't get a job right off because I graduated in December. So I had to wait until the next fall to get a band directing job, and I did. I taught in Clarendon, which is a small community of about 1,700 people, an hour outside of Amarillo. Um, and then I later got a job in Hereford, which is a much larger community. Um, and it's interesting going from seeing less than 100 kids per day to being part of a band program where I'm seeing almost 500 kids per day. That's kind of a different thing. But anyways, so while I was working in Hereford and band directing full time, I was doing my master's in composition. And the reason I studied a master's in composition was because it was the only way I could get a master's degree while working full time, because I hadn't taught long enough to actually qualify for the master's in education, and I didn't really want one. And I didn't really want to get one in conducting either, because that really seemed like um, it was the, I don't know. I don't want to diss it, so I'm not really going to say anymore. But like, I didn't want to do it, and so composition was basically my only option. So I did that. You know, again, didn't really want to be a composer, but I had a great time. All right. So was it worth it? And for me, the answer is definitely yes. And there are a few thoughts here. So for one, a lot of people kind of look at music school as like basically this place where you go and one camp kind of looks at it as this one place where Western uh, colonial white imperialism is thrust upon you, and you have to learn how to do. You have to learn all about Beethoven and Mozart and Schenker. You have to learn all that stuff, and you have no choice in the matter. And if you don't like it, you're dumb and whatever. That's kind of camp number one. Camp number two is they view it as this place where you go to be around people that are hungry for music, and like it's all about the music of today. And Berkeley and the Manhattan School are more like that because they're like more jazz and commercial oriented in general. But like, it's just this place where you go to be around other really hungry people for music. And then camp number three is where you go to get training to do a job. And none of these are really the complete picture. Like, that's not really it. It's like for the third one, going to get training to do a job, that literally was what I did. Getting a music education degree is training you to be a band director, and it's giving you a lot of skills and resources you need to be a band director. And that's fine, a music educator. You could also orchestra, choir, elementary music, whatever. So, yes, but being around people who are hungry for music, it's like, also yes, but it's not really like you aren't going to find all the guitar players that want to be the next biggest guitar player. You at a state school, it ends up being a bit different. You have a lot of people who are hungry to be better musicians, but they're not really so gung ho about expressing that. And I'm not really gung ho about expressing that. So like there was a bass trombone player there who's now a, he's getting around to quite a few orchestras, and he's played in the Iowa Symphony and others. And while I was there, you never found the guy because he was always in a practice room. If he wasn't in classes or rehearsals, he was practicing. And he is hungry for music, but you were never really around him because he kept to himself pretty much, and he was a great musician. And if you talked to him, he had a lot of insight. And his philosophy was, I'm always just trying to be better than I was yesterday. So everyone else was irrelevant to him, but he was still getting a lot out of it, And, the first point about it being this place of, Western colonial imperialism, you learn the classical white music and that's it. That's not really accurate depending on where you go. I mean, if you go to a conservatory where the point is that you win an orchestral job as a classical musician, then yes, that's what it is, because it's kind of like the nature of the audition circuit is set up. That's still reductive. It's not exactly what it is, but that's kind of why. So, kind of going beyond this, I was exposed to so many kinds of music at WT just purely because, you know, the symphonic band didn't play classical music. It played contemporary stuff being written, in the last 20 years. A lot of the stuff there. You know, we did play some of the greatest hits of the band rep, you know, so things like by Vaughan Williams, um, Holst, you know, those. But we also played a lot of stuff that was written in the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s whenever I was there. So it's a lot of stuff being contemporary by all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds. And I played in the jazz band, so it played big band rap, and there was a lot of stuff. And I was in the combo, so it played, um, you know, more jazz standards and other things like that. But also, you know, there was a men's chorus that sang old style men's chorus stuff, barbershop quartet. I was in the classes I took, you know, there were classes that I took that were focused on this is the history of women in music. So this is only focusing on women. And it was a very surface scratching level thing because that's a massive subject area. But there was that, and it was from all around the world. And then there was a history of the 19th century from all around the world, and 18th century, you know, that early 19th century, late 18th century. And it was like, okay, there was, so I was exposed to a lot of stuff, and I never had to study Schenker. And the analysis in music theory that we did was very general. And so, like, we didn't use figured bass and Roman numerals exclusively. We used chord symbols, and in a lot of ways, everything that I learned in my theory classes and everything that I learned in all of my theory study, I was able to easily adapt to understand other kinds of music, you know, and it was just like, okay, chord function is nice, but I don't necessarily need it for this. Or, you know, I can do a figured bass analysis, but I also understand that it's a very specific, like, thing for a very specific style of music from a very specific part of the world in a very specific time period. That's what we were taught. Um, and so I got a lot out of music school, and it made me who I am as a musician. I would not be as good a performer as I am. I would not be as good a composer or an orchestrator or an arranger without the experience I got in music school. And this kind of leads me to another thing, is that I was doing a huge amount of work on my own. And so I was taking what I was learning from classes and lessons and ensembles and other people, and I was doing my own work and exploration on myself. I wasn't just practicing the etudes I was given and the excerpts I was given by my horn professor. I was taking all the stuff he was telling me about technique and how to play efficiently and how to improve my sound. I was working on that religiously and trying to figure out how I could apply it just to my understanding of the instrument. And whenever it came to composition, I was doing my composition assignments, but we really quickly moved on to where he was like, okay, you can just bring me whatever you want to compose and we'll look at it. And I should do a real talk on my composition lessons at some point, but everything that I'm doing professionally, you know, playing as a horn player, a session musician who also is proficient on trumpet and trombone, tuba, euphonium. I've even recorded on clarinet and saxophone. There's a few recordings that I'm on flute. You know, I've played piano and bass and guitar. I've recorded all of these professionally. And a lot of that came from the fact that I was given a really good foundation to be able to do stuff on my own from people at WT. And you know, this isn't an ad for WT, but a lot of state schools are like this. The problem is that nobody knows about them because for the most part, they're regional and they're relatively small. And so they're known by the alumni base and their reputation. Whereas places like the Manhattan School in Berkeley, a lot of people will argue that, you know, it's about the work you do, a lot more about the work you do. And I can't speak on that because I didn't go to those places. But, you know, for a lot of people, music school isn't worth it. And, you know, there's a lot of people who say you can get that information on your own now. You know, you can go to musictheory.net and get an entire music theory education. You can find videos on YouTube on how to play your instrument. You can find resources in Lit on how to play your instrument. However, this is kind of my last little point. One of the things about music school, especially at a state school where they're not trying to produce, you know, all of these grads that go out to win orchestral auditions, is it's the rigor and the discipline of being in that environment that's supposed to push you. You know, it's if you don't do well enough on your jury at the end of the semester and the jury standards change student to student, then if you don't do well in that, you're not in the program anymore. So you have to be developing a certain amount on your instrument. And you have to pass your classes. And the only way to pass your classes is by doing the stuff in your classes, learning that stuff under the guidance of a teacher. And although there are a lot of people who can learn it on their own and make that difference on their own, a lot of people lack the actual discipline to sustain it and get the same amount out of it on their own. If you can and you can learn all of that on your own, please do. But music school, I would say, was worth it because it actually pushed me to be a lot more, because I couldn't do a lot of that stuff on my own. So anyways, I'll probably do a follow-up video on this at some point. The bell just rang, so I have to go teach. But yeah, you guys are fantastic. And thank you for watching my videos. And I hope that you have a wonderful day.